Hello, my dear viewers. I wish you pleasant viewing and a wonderful day. I also look forward to your feedback in the comments. My name is Stacy Reynolds, and until yesterday, I thought I was holding everything together. Single mom to a fierce little 6-year-old named Ellie, full-time marketing strategist at AviorTech, and part-time magician when it came to stretching paychecks, hours, and emotional bandwidth. I had routines, spreadsheets, backup plans. I had coffee-fueled mornings and silent, exhausted nights. But I had control. At least, I thought I did. The HR meeting wasn't even on my calendar. I was on my way to grab a turkey club from the deli across the street when I got the ping from Amanda, the HR manager. "Can you pop by my office in 5?" It didn't feel ominous at first. Amanda was always polite, polished. She wore pastel blouses and never raised her voice, the kind of woman who apologized for not using emojis in work emails. So when she offered me a seat across from her glass desk, I smiled, still thinking about whether I wanted chips or a cookie. Then she slid the paper across. I remember her voice, not cruel, just practiced, detached. "Due to recent restructuring, your role will remain but with adjusted compensation." I blinked. "Adjusted?" I repeated. Amanda folded her hands. "There's a revised salary structure. We're asking you to accept a 70% reduction in base pay, effective immediately." I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that felt like it came from someone else. Amanda didn't flinch. "We understand this is difficult," she said, "but these are unprecedented times. The board believes this adjustment will allow us to retain staff while weathering the market downturn." My heart had already fallen into my stomach, but it kept sinking. 70%? I said again, dumbly. "Correct." They knew. That was the worst part. They knew. I was a single mother. My ex-husband disappeared into the ether when Ellie was still in diapers, and child support had become a fantasy somewhere between unicorns and student loan forgiveness. They knew I had no one to fall back on, no savings, no second income. They knew. I should have screamed, demanded justice, flipped the desk, or walked out dramatically. But I didn't. I smiled. It wasn't real, more like a survival reflex, and said, "I need 24 hours to think about it." Amanda nodded, relieved. "Of course. Take your time." I stood, thanked her, and walked out of that office like someone carrying groceries through a hurricane. My legs moved. My mouth stayed shut. The mask stayed on until I hit the parking lot. The moment I closed the car door, I shattered. My chest heaved as I gasped through sobs I couldn't control. Tears streamed down my cheeks, staining the collar of my coat. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, trying to breathe, trying to think. How do you explain that kind of panic? That sudden, suffocating knowledge that your world is no longer safe? I thought about Ellie's piano lessons, about her little backpack with the unicorn keychain, about the pink birthday invitation on our fridge, and the half-paid power bill tucked under a magnet. I thought about the groceries we just bought, the rent I just paid, the school field trip she was so excited about. And then I thought about calling my mom. But she was gone. 3 years now. The weight of that grief came rushing back in like a tide. I needed her voice, her steady way of saying, "We'll figure this out, Stace." But all I had was the echo of her in my memory and the cold realization that I was alone in this. My phone buzzed. Ellie's aftercare. A reminder that pickup was at 4:45 today. I still had time, but I felt like the minutes were melting away faster than I could count them. I sat in the car for what felt like hours. At some point, I started talking to myself. Whispering, really. "You're okay. You're okay. Just breathe." But I wasn't. The truth was, I was at a crossroads, and they'd put me there with no map. Either I took a pay cut so severe it would crush our lives into unrecognizable pieces, or I walked away from the only job that had kept our fragile little world afloat. There was a moment, somewhere in the mess of tears and tremors, where I looked up at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and I saw something else, something steadier. Not strength exactly, not yet, but defiance. That's when I picked up my phone again. Not to call Amanda, not to cry to a friend. I scrolled to a name I'd saved months ago, half as a joke, half as a dare to myself. Malcolm Greaves, the CEO of Valorbridge, Aviatech's most hated competitor. He'd handed me his card once at a conference in Chicago. "If you ever get tired of coloring inside the lines," he said with a wink, "give me a call." That night, I did. And I found out they'd been waiting for me. It wasn't supposed to end like this. 9 years ago, I walked into Aviatech when it was still just a gritty little startup operating out of a refurbished warehouse with exposed brick and cheap coffee. We had no health benefits, no elevator, and no proper HR department. But we had energy, purpose. We were building something from nothing, and we believed in it. I was 2 months out from a messy divorce, barely holding it together. My daughter, Ellie, was still in diapers, and I had a savings account with 3 digits and a closet full of court documents. My ex had walked out with a shrug and a final, "This isn't what I signed up for." And maybe it wasn't. But Ellie was. She was mine. And failure was not an option. I walked into that interview wearing the only blazer that still fit, with my resume printed on the cheapest paper I could find. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. "Give me the toughest project," I told them. "I'll deliver." And I did. Over and over. I worked weekends, late nights, holidays. I brought Ellie in on Sundays when daycare was closed. She'd nap in a blanket fort under my desk, while I coded or strategized or rewrote entire campaigns from scratch. We'd eat microwaved mac and cheese in the break room, and I'd tell her stories about the big ideas we were building. There were times I couldn't afford groceries and gas in the same week. Times I called the power company and begged for another extension. But I always showed up. Sharp, reliable, relentless. I taught myself everything I didn't already know. Analytics, client onboarding, CRM platforms, even basic HTML when the dev team flaked. I was a team of one, a mom of one, and somehow that became my entire identity. The woman who made it all work. And over time, it got better. We moved out of our tiny, moldy studio and into a 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and a bathtub Ellie didn't cry about. I bought us a couch. I started using real coffee grounds instead of instant. Clients began asking for me by name, not the company, me. They'd email directly, send holiday cards, invite me to family weddings. I knew their kids' names, their anniversaries, their pain points, and they knew mine. I wasn't just someone they worked with. I was someone they trusted. When Ellie got sick and I missed a campaign review, one client sent soup and puzzles. Another, an executive at a tech firm in Seattle, called just to check if I had someone watching her so I could sleep. That job was never just a paycheck, it was proof that I could rebuild, that I could be a provider, a partner, a mom, and still have a future that didn't revolve around scraping by. But all of that changed last year. Aviatech got acquired. Suddenly, the people I'd spent almost a decade building with started disappearing. One by one, they were transitioned, restructured, let go with gratitude. Our fearless founder, Joel, who once helped me carry a screaming toddler to my car during a product launch, was replaced by a rotating carousel of suits who used words like resource optimization and value realignment. They didn't see people, they saw costs. And the culture we'd built? It evaporated. We used to brainstorm over cold pizza at midnight. Now, no one stayed a minute past 5 unless they were scared of being next. Conversations became hushed. Smiles felt performative. They installed new leaders who'd never written a line of code or closed a client deal, but they spoke in confident tones about our brand architecture. I once sat through a meeting where a senior VP called our decade of B2B partnerships non-essential legacy accounts. I wanted to scream. Still, I kept showing up. I kept producing results, hitting numbers, mentoring the younger hires who reminded me of myself. I held on to this delusion that excellence would protect me. But it didn't. They didn't slash my salary because they couldn't afford me. They did it because I reminded them of a company they wanted to erase, a chapter they were trying to rewrite with cheaper labor and less resistance. I was inconvenient. I was expensive. I was legacy. And so, just like that, they slid the paper across and waited for me to fold. As I sat in the car, staring blankly through the windshield, my mind played cruel little montages. Ellie's first steps in the office hallway, my promotion party in the break room with grocery store cupcakes, the night I slept under my desk during a rollout that nearly crashed and saved the entire project, the dozens of tiny sacrifices that no one remembered but me. 9 years of blood, sweat, and silent tears, reduced to a number on a page. I didn't cry again, not this time. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I didn't know why. Maybe it was part therapy, part instinct, but I hit record. "This is Stacy Monroe," I said into the silence. "Today, Aviatech told me that 9 years of my life were worth 30% of what I used to make. They took everything I built and told me it wasn't enough." I paused, exhaled. But they forgot something. I didn't build it for them. I built it for me. And for Ellie. And I'm not done. I saved the file and stared at the screen for a long time. Then I did something radical. I called someone who actually remembered my worth. The beginning of the end came with a press release. Aviatech proudly announces its strategic acquisition by Interhouse Global, a move that will strengthen our global position and drive innovation. I remember the exact moment I read it. I was in the break room, leaning against the chipped counter, with a paper cup of weak coffee in my hand. The room buzzed with conversations that didn't quite reach full sentences. People were glancing at their phones, refreshing inboxes, whispering. I stared at the screen, rereading that sentence over and over, like it might change if I blinked hard enough. It didn't. They called it a merger, a partnership, a strategic realignment. But we all knew what it really was. It was a takeover. And Interhouse didn't come in quietly. They arrived like a flood, suits and silence, clipboards and cold smiles. Their consultants swept through the building with their laser eyes and zero patience. They asked the wrong questions. Or maybe the right ones, if the only thing you cared about was margin. Who does what? How long does it take? Why do you need that many? In the first week, 3 people disappeared. No warning, no emails, no goodbyes. Just empty desks and HR speak, involuntary transitions. It became a phrase we whispered like a curse. The next week, 5 more were gone. Entire teams evaporated under the guise of optimization. My team was gutted, 9 people reduced to 3. The 2 who remained with me looked as shell-shocked as I felt. But the work didn't vanish with the people. It doubled, and we were expected to deliver. I went from managing strategy and client relations to doing everything: creating graphics, writing copy, handling contracts, compiling data reports, troubleshooting tech. I even had to schedule my own meetings and run my own IT tickets because our admin support was consolidated. I became the last stop, the one who couldn't afford to drop the ball. So I worked. God, did I work. I logged 14-hour days, ate dinner from vending machines, and started keeping dry shampoo in my drawer. Ellie, my daughter, stopped asking when I'd be home and started saying things like, "I'll show you my painting tomorrow, Mommy. You'll be too tired tonight." That sentence gutted me more than any spreadsheet ever could. I missed her 3rd-grade play. I missed her first piano recital. I missed the moment she finally rode her bike without training wheels. I have a blurry video her babysitter sent me of that moment. I've never watched it. I kept telling myself I was doing this for her, that if I just hung on a little longer, I could provide the stability we'd fought so hard to build. I needed to believe that sacrifice led to security. That loyalty had weight. But every week, someone else was let go. I started tracking the pattern: who stayed, who vanished, what teams were folded into others. It wasn't random. It was calculated, silent, surgical. Still, I believed I would be spared. Because I was essential, right? I had institutional memory. I had the client relationships. I was the one people turned to when things broke. I knew the company like I knew my own reflection. I'd grown it, nurtured it, bled for it. I believed that mattered, until the meetings started happening without me. The new leadership stopped replying to my emails unless something was on fire. Decisions were made in closed-door sessions. I was told to streamline communications and focus on execution. Translation: shut up and do what you're told. The new CMO, Eric, with his sharp jaw and cold eyes, referred to our legacy accounts as low-yield baggage. He told me I was emotionally attached to outdated clients, that I needed to think like a leader, not a mother. I remember the chill that ran through me when he said that. Not because it was insulting, but because I realized he saw no difference between the two. Leadership without empathy wasn't leadership at all. It was control. I started waking up at 3 a.m. in full panic attacks. My chest would tighten like a fist, and my thoughts would race. Did I miss something? Did I forget to follow up? Will this be the week? I kept a notepad beside my bed. Most nights, it had scribbles like, "Email Jen about Q3 numbers," and "Resend proposal to Interhouse Zurich." One night, I wrote "Get out" in big, shaky letters and didn't remember doing it. But I didn't get out. I kept going. I got promoted to unofficial martyrdom, and I wore it like a badge. Because I needed it to mean something. Because if it didn't mean something, then what the hell had I been killing myself for? Then came the meeting. Just another midweek HR call, nothing fancy. No warning. Just Amanda, the same HR rep who once gave me a mug that said, "You make things happen." She slid the paper across the table. That's when I realized, the floor doesn't fall out from under you all at once. It gives a little first. It creaks and shifts. You ignore the cracks. You tell yourself it's normal. And then one day, it disappears. The room smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. It was the same conference room where, just a year ago, I had led a Q4 campaign debrief that earned us the company's largest client to date. Back then, the table had been full. My team around me, laughter, coffee cups clinking. It had felt like something, like progress. Now, the same space felt smaller. Clinical, surgical. Amanda from HR was already seated when I arrived, her hands folded over her laptop like a nervous priest holding a confession. The other man beside her was unfamiliar, but I knew what he was before he even spoke. "Stacy," he said, standing too quickly, extending a hand I didn't take. "Glenn Harper, Director of Strategic Integration. Thanks for making time." That title, Strategic Integration. It was the corporate equivalent of a cleanup crew, the ones who came in after the real decisions had been made to explain why the bodies were being cleared. I took my seat, stiff and silent, while Amanda gave me a brittle smile. "We wanted to connect with you about the next phase of your role." My role. The words sounded hollow already. Glenn jumped in. No time wasted. "As you know, since the acquisition by Interhouse, we've been evaluating all roles across the organization for alignment and efficiency. After a detailed review, we've identified redundancies in several functions, including yours." Redundancies. My hands stayed still in my lap, but inside, I felt a slow, boiling ache. "Effective next month," he continued, "your current position will be phased out." The air shifted, but I didn't move. I didn't blink. Because I already knew. I'd felt it in the creeping silence, in the way emails were redirected, in the absence of invites to strategy calls I used to lead. Amanda slid the familiar paper across the table. I didn't pick it up. I just looked at the number, $52,000, from $130,000 to 52, a cut so deep it felt personal. "We'd like to offer you a transition into a newly created role," Glenn said. "One that reflects the new structure and provides continuity with your existing responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" I asked, voice sharp now. "You've reassigned my clients. My budget was taken away. I'm not managing anyone anymore." Glenn didn't flinch. "You'd remain involved in strategic development and day-to-day execution, but the team oversight model is being consolidated. This is a flat structure now, more agile." Amanda chimed in. It's a chance to stay with the company through a period of growth. And once the dust settles, there's potential. Potential. Another word that meant nothing and promised less. So I keep doing the work, I said. But without the title, without the pay, and without the team I spent nearly a decade building? Glenn gave a tight nod. It's the best we can do. The anger that rose in my chest wasn't hot. It was cold. It was ancient. It came from every late night I'd spent in that office, every birthday party I'd missed, every bath time I'd whispered through the phone while Lila cried because I wasn't home. It came from the sacrifices they'd never seen, the loyalty they'd never returned. Amanda leaned forward. We know this is a difficult moment, Stacy. Take your time to review it. I stared at the paper, at the bland black and white text, as if it hadn't just cracked the floor beneath my feet. I don't need time, I said quietly. They looked surprised. Because I know exactly what this is. This isn't an offer, it's a sentence. You want me to wear the same armor without any protection, carry the same weight with broken legs, smile while I fade. Neither of them responded. Their silence was louder than anything they could have said. I've given this company 9 years, I continued, my voice steady now. I built client portfolios from scratch. I trained new hires who now outrank me. I stayed through 3 reorgs, a buyout, and 2 rounds of layoffs. I've been loyal, I've been quiet, I've been excellent, and none of it mattered. Glenn cleared his throat. You're reading too much into this. No, I snapped. I'm reading it exactly as it's written. And I was. Because I'd spent a decade translating business speak into real consequences. I knew when I was being edged out politely. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that I wasn't afraid anymore. Because last night, I'd sent 3 emails. One to a recruiter who had been quietly chasing me for years. One to a client who had always said, if you ever go independent, I'll follow. And one to Brandon Wells. Yes, that Brandon. CEO of the company that once tried to poach me. And all 3 had replied. Glenn and Amanda waited for my reaction like I was supposed to crumple. But I didn't. I stood. Calm. Tall. I'll let you know my decision, I said, in 24 hours. And this time, I meant something entirely different. Because the next move wouldn't be theirs. It would be mine. The morning after the meeting, I didn't feel anger, or panic, or dread. I felt hollow. The kind of quiet that follows a storm that rips through everything and leaves behind a strange stillness. Not peace, just absence. It was 5:12 a.m. when I gave up on trying to sleep. I got out of bed, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and flipped on the dim light. The silence of my apartment was interrupted only by the hum of the fridge and the gentle drip of the coffee machine. I sat at the table, staring at nothing in particular. On the wall in front of me, Ellie's drawings fluttered slightly from the draft under the door. Stick figures, rainbows, a dinosaur with glitter glue for eyes. I'd barely noticed them before. They were the only color in a world that had turned gray. The bitterness of the coffee hit the back of my throat just as my phone rang. Anna. My chest tightened. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since she walked out of Aviatech with her head high and her eyes set on something brighter. I envied her then. I admired her more now. I answered, my voice still raspy. Anna. Stace, she said quickly. I'm sorry, did I wake you? No, I said. I've been up. What's going on? There was a pause, the sound of street noise in the background. I heard what happened. The demotion. The offer. Her voice wrapped around the word like it was toxic. Because it was. I said nothing. Anna sighed. I know you, Stacy. I know you're probably still trying to make sense of it, maybe wondering what you could have done differently. But I also know that what they did wasn't your failure. It was theirs. I swallowed hard. I didn't just call to talk, she continued. I have news. That got my attention. There's a position opening up at Brixton and Rowe. I blinked. The marketing firm, the one that poached Lane last year? That's the one, she said. And it's not just any job. They're building a new enterprise strategy division. They need someone who knows the industry inside out, someone with leadership, with grit. She paused, then added softly, I told them about you. The words hit me like a gust of warm air after months of frost. You what? I told them how you built Avior Tech's entire B2B model from the ground up, how you took clients from 5 figures to 7, how your campaigns consistently beat projections. I told them you were the reason I stayed sane as long as I did. I didn't realize I was gripping the edge of the table until my fingers ached. They want to meet you, Anna said. The CEO himself. Tomorrow morning. He cleared his calendar. The emotion that surged in my chest wasn't joy. Not yet. It was recognition. Someone saw me. Really saw me. Not as a redundancy. Not as a line item to slash. But as value. As leadership. As me. Stace? Anna said when I didn't respond. I'm here, I whispered. I'm just overwhelmed. You deserve this, she said. All of it. And more. For a long moment after we hung up, I sat in silence again. But it was a different kind of silence now. One filled with possibility. My laptop waited on the counter. I opened it. Clicked New Document. Typed the words. Resignation Letter. Stacy Monroe. The words didn't tremble this time. They marched across the screen with purpose. This was no longer a reactive move. This was reclamation. Ellie wandered in as the sun started to rise, hair a tangled halo, dragging her favorite stuffed turtle by the leg. Mommy, she yawned. Why are you up? I scooped her into my lap, burying my face in her sleepy curls. I'm changing things, I whispered. She blinked at me. Good change? I smiled. For both of us. The building was a mirror to everything I'd forgotten success could look like. Brixton and Rowe's headquarters wasn't showy. It was intentional. Clean lines, warm wood panels, and sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. People weren't whispering or looking over their shoulders. They moved with confidence. Collaboration, no panic, no fear. A receptionist greeted me by name. Mr. Wells is expecting you, Ms. Monroe. Right this way. The elevator ride to the top floor felt surreal. I glanced at my reflection. Hair pulled back, heels polished, lips painted with a shade I hadn't worn in months. I looked like the woman I used to be. Or maybe the one I was becoming again. Brandon Wells met me at his office door with a firm handshake and an easy smile. Stacy, he said, it's about time we talked. His office wasn't what I expected. No towering desk, no shelves full of business awards, just a large circular table in the center, a couch by the window, and 2 mugs of coffee already waiting. Cream, no sugar, right? He said, offering one. I blinked. You remembered? I do my homework, he replied with a wink. We sat. There was no formality, no dance. Just a conversation between 2 people who knew exactly what the stakes were. I've watched your work for years, he began, even before Interhouse came into the picture. Your Q2 revamp for Avior's cloud services? That campaign reshaped an entire market vertical. Our clients were asking if we could do what Stacy Monroe did. That's when I knew. Someday, I'd call you. I felt heat creep into my cheeks. It had been a long time since anyone said my name with respect instead of warning. Brandon leaned forward. Let's skip the pitch. I know what you're worth. I'm not here to haggle. I'm here to give you the room to build. He slid a sleek folder across the table. Inside was not just a job offer, it was a declaration. A base salary of $165, a $25 signing bonus, quarterly performance incentives, full health, dental, and vision insurance, including coverage for dependents, 5 weeks PTO, a work-from-home flexibility clause, a relocation stipend, and at the bottom, in crisp, bold font, Vice President, Enterprise Strategy, reporting directly to the CEO. I stared at the page. I had to blink twice to make sure it wasn't a hallucination. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned to the next page. It outlined mentorship resources, executive coaching, a wellness budget, and even a stipend for continuing education. But none of that hit me like what Brandon said next. We want your voice, not just your output. We're building a new kind of team, And we need leaders who know how to create, not just perform. For a second, I didn't speak. Because a part of me, the battered part, still didn't believe it was real. That after months of being hollowed out and used, someone could look at me and see value, see potential. He watched me. I know what they did to you, Stacy, and I know why. I swallowed. What do you mean? His smile faded. We've got ears in the industry. Innerhouse isn't just restructuring, they're extracting, phasing out high-cost regional talent and replacing them with outsourced teams. But before they pull the trigger, they need people to hand off institutional knowledge. Quietly, my mouth went dry. You're saying they were going to use me to train my replacement? He nodded. It's already happening in 2 other branches. You're not the first, but you're the only one with an open door in front of you. My chest tightened. The final puzzle piece slid into place. All the signs I had ignored. The sudden interest in documentation. The push for me to create handover guides. The subtle erasure of my authority while keeping me tethered to the workload. They never planned to keep me. They planned to download me. Brandon's voice softened. You don't have to go out like that. I looked at the contract again. At my name, bold and centered, across a leadership title they weren't afraid to give me. Something inside me shifted. I stood. Brandon rose with me. I extended my hand. Let's build something better. He grinned. Welcome to Brixton and Row, Stacy. As I left the office, the city stretched out below me. Familiar, but now full of possibility. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking toward it. Returning to the Aviatech office felt like slipping into the skin of someone I no longer was. Everything looked the same. The same water-stained ceiling tile above the elevator. The same broken copier jammed with paper. The same polite nods from people pretending not to see each other. But to me, it all looked different now. Smaller. Dustier. Like a stage set after the play had ended. I walked in wearing the blazer I'd once reserved for boardroom presentations and life-defining meetings. It felt different on me now. Not armor, not a disguise. It felt like truth. The version of me I'd fought to bury under humility and loyalty. My heels echoed against the tile floor with a rhythm that made people look up. And as they did, I saw something I hadn't seen in their eyes in a long time. Respect. It wasn't just the outfit, it was the posture, the calm, the fire I wasn't hiding anymore. I passed by desks where colleagues glanced at me, then at each other. Not with pity or curiosity, but with understanding. A few even straightened in their chairs, like the air had shifted. I reached the small conference room on the 2nd floor, where I'd been told to report to finalize next steps. As if I were a patient being discharged from a hospital, I hadn't realized I'd been bleeding in for years. Amanda from HR was already there, her laptop open, her face locked in neutral professionalism. Glenn Harper, the man who thought he could disassemble people with the ease of reordering office supplies, stood when I entered. He gestured to a chair. I sat, crossed my legs, and placed a single folder in front of me. Glenn started talking before I even opened it. We appreciate you taking the time to consider our proposal. We're hoping to move forward quickly and ensure a smooth— I'm not staying, I said flatly. He stopped mid-sentence. Amanda blinked. I'm sorry? I'm not staying, I repeated calmly. I'm not accepting the new role, and I won't be transitioning into anything else. Glenn laughed once, short and sharp. You're making a very impulsive decision. No, I said. You are. They waited for more, so I gave it to them. I reviewed my contract last night. Section 9.4 specifically outlines constructive dismissal, a reduction in compensation of more than 25%, combined with a material change in responsibilities, triggers immediate resignation with cause, and severance eligibility. Amanda's hands twitched slightly above her keyboard. I know the law, I know my rights, and more importantly, I leaned forward slightly. I know exactly what this is. Glenn crossed his arms. Enlighten us. This isn't restructuring, I said. This is extraction. You slashed my title, stole my clients, gutted my team, and asked me to stay long enough to train the offshore replacements you haven't announced yet. Amanda paled. You've turned my legacy into a temporary training manual, but you underestimated one thing. What's that? Glenn asked, jaw tight. My ability to walk away. I reached into the folder and slid my letter of resignation across the table. Printed, signed, final. This is my formal resignation, effective immediately. Amanda looked like she wanted to speak, but I raised a hand gently. No transition meetings, no documentation, no farewell call. You don't get to use me while writing me out. Glenn muttered. This is highly unprofessional. Actually, I said coolly, what's unprofessional is thinking I'd quietly hand over everything I built to someone cheaper, while you pretend I'm still part of the team. I stood, collecting my bag. You don't need to escort me out. I've already returned my access badge. My files are clean. My calendar is clear. And then I paused. I know you've been wondering where I'll land. Amanda tilted her head. We haven't. I'm joining Brixton and Rowe, I said. Vice President of Enterprise Strategy. Full benefits, better pay, my own team, and a CEO who doesn't pretend I'm invisible. The silence in the room thickened. You don't have to say anything, I said. It's already done. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Oh, and one more thing. They both looked up. Tell the next woman you do this to that it wasn't her fault. And then I walked out. The hallway felt longer this time, but I didn't rush. I walked slowly, deliberately. Every step was mine, every breath freer than the last. People watched me go, but no one stopped me. Because they knew. Stacey Monroe wasn't someone you dismissed anymore. She was someone you remembered. I didn't sleep much the night before. But for once, it wasn't because of anxiety. It wasn't fear churning in my stomach, or dread rising in my throat. It was something unfamiliar, like the quiet anticipation that comes before a sunrise. I lay in bed listening to the faint hum of the city beyond my window. My thoughts stretched across the silence, like laundry hung out to dry. I'd left. Not just mentally, not just emotionally. I'd actually walked away from Avior Tech. And yet, I hadn't let go of everything just yet. There were people who needed to hear it from me. Not from LinkedIn. Not through back channels. From me. I got Ellie ready for school the next morning. She chattered about lunch swaps and playground alliances while we walked to the car. She tugged her jacket zipper halfway up, then looked up at me with those wide, perceptive eyes. You're different, she said out of nowhere. I paused with her backpack in my hand. Different how? You're not rushing. You didn't drink your coffee in the car. And you looked happy when you packed my lunch. Not like, tight. Tight? She scrunched her nose. Like when your face is mad but you say it's not. I let out a laugh. You're too smart. She grinned. So you quit? I blinked. What? Your job. The bad one. My heart caught. She wasn't wrong. She had seen me fading day by day, even when I thought I was doing a good job hiding it. I did, I said. I left yesterday. Her face broke into a smile so pure, so unfiltered, it made my eyes sting. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Good. Now you don't have to be sad all the time. And just like that, my decision became more than justified. It became sacred. After I dropped her off, I drove home, changed into something soft, and brewed coffee I actually had time to drink. I sat on the balcony, laptop open, and dialed Emily's number. She answered on the third ring. Stacey, is everything okay? I hadn't spoken to her since she was quietly pushed into early retirement during the Interhouse takeover. She'd been the last real advocate for people like me, the ones who built the company brick by brick. I resigned yesterday, I said, cutting to the point. A long pause. You finally did it. There was no judgment in her voice, just quiet relief. I thought I'd feel scared, I admitted, but I don't. I feel free, like I can breathe for the first time in months. You've been carrying that place on your back for too long, she said, And they repaid you by trying to cut your knees out. We talked for nearly an hour. I told her everything. The offer, the insult, the plan to outsource, the truth I learned too late. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You didn't leave too soon. You left right on time. You got out before they could take any more of you." I thanked her, and before hanging up, she added softly, "Promise me you'll stop trying to prove yourself to people who don't deserve it." I promised. Then I made the second call. The bigger one. Chris Maldonado answered before the second ring. "Tell me you're finally free." I blinked. "How did you—" "I heard. These walls may be corporate, but they echo like hell." I laughed. "Yes, I'm free." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath on my behalf. About damn time. I told him everything. Brixton and Rowe. The title. The benefits. The fact that someone finally looked me in the eye and said, "We see you." "Send me your new contact info right now," he said. "I've got 3 upcoming initiatives I want you to run point on. Not Avier. You." I tried to stay professional, but my voice cracked. "That means more than you know." "No, you mean more than they ever realized." I kept telling them, "She's the reason your accounts don't bleed." But they stopped listening the moment they got shiny new toys. There was a pause. Then he said something that would stay with me for a long time. "You're not someone who plugs in. You're someone who builds the whole damn circuit." I saved his words. Not just mentally. I wrote them down later that night in a notebook I hadn't opened since before the buyout. After our call ended, I closed my laptop and walked through the apartment with a strange feeling settling into my chest. Not adrenaline, not pride, but rightness. When Ellie got home, I let her pick dinner. She chose pancakes. I made them from scratch, flipping each one while she danced around the kitchen with her turtle in hand. "You're like a weekend mom today," she giggled. "I'm trying to be a weekday mom again," I said, ruffling her curls. We ate on the couch, wrapped in blankets, cartoons flickering on the screen. She leaned into my side and whispered, "You're not tired anymore." I looked down at her. "No, baby," I said. "I'm just getting started." The week had been going well. Better than well, actually. I'd been with Brixton and Rowe just under a month, but the difference was like breathing pure oxygen after years of stale air. The pace was demanding. The projects were ambitious. But there was something I hadn't felt in years. Alignment. For once, my brain wasn't working overtime to defend itself, just to create. That Thursday, I was putting the finishing touches on a strategic rollout for one of our biggest clients when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something, maybe instinct, maybe old habits, made me swipe. Stacy Monroe. A slight pause then. "Stacy, it's Glenn Harper." His voice hadn't changed. Same smug cadence, same artificial calm he always used in HR meetings when he wanted to sound sympathetic but still in control. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," I said evenly, "but go ahead." There was a brief silence on his end. I imagined him sitting at that sterile conference table, fingers steepled, still believing he could steer the conversation. "I'll get right to it," he said, clearing his throat. "Since your departure, we've experienced some turbulence." "Turbulence," I repeated. "We've lost 3 major clients," he said, voice tight. 2 were accounts you previously managed. The third cited a decline in internal leadership as a reason for terminating their contract. I sipped my tea, giving him nothing. "I won't pretend this hasn't been costly," he continued. "And frankly, we believe your absence has had a significant impact on client confidence." Translation: "We didn't realize how much you mattered until things started falling apart." He went on, "We'd like to extend an offer for you to return. Your original title, a higher salary, $15K, above your Brixton package, a signing bonus, enhanced benefits, and we're willing to discuss building a team around you again." There it was. The panic under the polish. "We believe there's still a future for you at Avier Tech." I closed my laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair, And then I laughed. Not mockingly, not cruelly, just softly. The sound of someone who had finally outgrown the need to be asked. "Glenn," I said, "thank you for the offer, truly." "But no," he faltered. "No? No," I repeated. "I'm not coming back." A pause. "I don't think you understand the scope of the offer. We're willing to—" "I understand perfectly," I said. "But you don't." My voice didn't shake. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was clear. I gave 9 years to Aviotech. I worked through holidays, illnesses, daycare crises. I helped build your client relationships from the ground up. And when the company was acquired, I adapted, even as the ground shifted beneath me. I stayed when others left. I led when others hid. I let the silence stretch before I continued. And in the end, I was asked to accept a 70% pay cut, told to hand over my clients, told to stay and train a replacement. "You didn't just underestimate my value, you erased it." Glenn's voice came back, a little more fragile. "That was a miscalculation." "No," I said. "It was a choice. And now I've made mine." I stood up, even though he couldn't see me. My body needed the posture to match my words. "I'm not returning for more money, or bonuses, or retroactive respect. Because if I accept that now, it means I'm saying the way you treated me was acceptable. And it wasn't." There was a long, painful pause. "So, that's it?" I looked out the window. The sky was streaked with orange and soft gray clouds. Dusk was coming. But this didn't feel like an ending. This felt like peace. "That's dignity, Glenn," I said, "and I've finally found mine." I ended the call. No dramatic goodbye. No space for rebuttal. Just a clean, final, full stop. That evening, Ellie and I made spaghetti together. She insisted on shaping the meatballs herself, which meant they were all different sizes and cooked unevenly. But she was so proud of them that I said nothing. We ate by candlelight at the dining table because she said fancy dinner made Thursday feel special. As she twirled noodles onto her fork, she asked, "Did that man from your old job call you again?" I blinked. "How did you know?" "You made your grown-up thinking face. And you stood up while talking, like you were telling someone really important stuff." I smiled. "He offered me my old job back." Her mouth dropped open. "What? Did you say no?" "I did." "Why?" she asked, eyes wide. I paused, then leaned in. "Because I don't go back to places that don't respect me. Not anymore." She sat with that for a moment. Then she nodded slowly, like she understood in a way only a child could, intuitively, deeply, honestly. "I'm glad," she said. "You're braver now." My chest tightened. "Braver?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, like a superhero, but with coffee and email. I laughed, then reached across the table and took her hand. "No more bad jobs," she declared. "No more," I promised. And as we finished dinner, giggling over lumpy meatballs and lit candles, I knew, without doubt, without hesitation, that I'd made the right choice. Not because I'd found a better job, but because I'd found myself. 6 months. That's how long it took to reinvent my life. In 6 months, I had gone from being discarded to being in demand, from quietly enduring to unapologetically leading, from surviving to building. Brixton and Rowe wasn't perfect. No company ever is. But they meant what they said. When they told me I was being brought in to create, to shape, to lead, they backed it up with action, not empty promises and meaningless perks. It started with a whiteboard. Brandon called me into his office 2 weeks after I joined. "This," he said, tapping the glossy surface now mounted on the far wall, "is yours. Design your team, from scratch. No legacy issues, no politics, no baggage, just people you trust." I stood there for a minute, marker in hand, trying to remember the last time someone had trusted me this much. I started with Anna. She'd been my first call when everything crumbled, and she was the first person I called when the doors opened again. I didn't need to explain the vision. She was the vision. Strategic, brilliant, loyal. She was in before I could finish the sentence. Then came Liam, analytics wizard, unjustly demoted after the buyout. Then Tasha, quietly powerful, overlooked and overworked for years. Then Marcus, then Noor, then Jamie. Each one of them was someone who had been passed over, ignored, diminished. Now, they were the architects of our future. Every Friday, we had team lunches on the rooftop. Not mandatory, not performative, just connection. We laughed, we shared ideas. Sometimes we just sat in silence, staring out at the skyline, remembering what it felt like to breathe at work. My old clients started finding me. Slowly at first. It began with one, Elaine from Orion Tech, who I'd worked with through 4 product launches. She called me directly. "I saw your name in a Brixton email," she said. "I couldn't believe it." "You know me," I replied. "I don't stay quiet forever." She didn't hesitate. "We're shifting our account, effective immediately." Then came Darren from VoxGrid. Then Simon from Telenova. Even the notoriously prickly Rogers firm sent an inquiry with the subject line, "Is Stacey Monroe available?" Each message, each handshake, each signature on a new contract wasn't just a win. It was a reclamation. They weren't coming to Brixton. They were coming to me. And I finally understood something that had taken me years to believe. I was the value. Not the company that dismissed me. Not the salary they offered. Not the brand name they used to keep me quiet. Me. By the 3rd month, it was industry talk. Aviotech's unraveling. They'd lost 6 of their top clients. Their leadership had gone through 2 restructurings. A memo leaked on LinkedIn outlining organizational instability. Their stock took a hit. Anonymous Glassdoor reviews appeared overnight, full of phrases like directionless, toxic, disposable. People asked me if I felt vindicated. I didn't, because I wasn't thinking about them anymore. While they scrambled to contain the mess they'd created, I was too busy building something better. At home, things had changed in ways I hadn't even noticed until they were suddenly there. Ellie and I started having slow mornings, real ones. Pancakes on Wednesdays, music while brushing teeth. Her laughter echoing through the apartment like wind chimes. No more panicked school drop-offs or whispered apologies about missed bedtimes. I took her to the office one Friday during break. She walked through the lobby with wide eyes, clutching my hand. "Is this your place?" she whispered. "It's where I work now," I said. "But the team? There are people." She nodded, serious. "Do they know you're the boss?" I laughed. "I think they do." We sat in my office together. I let her draw with markers on the whiteboard while I answered emails. When Brandon stopped by and asked who the artist was, Ellie said proudly, "I'm the boss's daughter." He grinned and offered her a high five. "Then you're practically running the place." That night she told me, "You're happier, and you hug better now." It nearly broke me. Because it was true. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a shadow of myself. One evening, after Ellie fell asleep, I found an old folder on my computer labeled Career Stuff. Inside were documents from my Aviotech days, performance reviews, project decks, email chains I had saved to prove my worth. I opened one, then another. They felt like artifacts, like letters from a past life. I read a line from an old email. "Stacey, can you handle this last-minute pivot?" And felt nothing. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I closed the folder, deleted it. For good. Now, when I walk into my office and see my team, my people, I don't wonder whether I'm doing enough. I don't question if I'm valued. I know. Because I built this. Not from spite, not from revenge, but from resilience. Aviotech's crisis was still unfolding, but it didn't belong to me anymore. That chapter was closed, and I was writing a new one. Every single day. 6 months later, I barely recognized the woman I used to be. It's strange how pain can sharpen your vision, how stepping away from the fire lets you finally see just how much it was burning you. Looking back, I don't know how I lived in that level of stress for so long, how I justified it, how I smiled through it, how I made it seem normal. But I did. For years. Until I didn't. 6 months after I walked out of Aviatech for the last time, the world kept turning. But everything had shifted. By then, 5 of Aviatech's legacy clients had switched suppliers. Quietly at first, then more openly. Some migrated to Brixton and Rowe. Others didn't. It wasn't a victory parade. It wasn't even personal. They left because trust is a currency, and Aviatech had long since gone bankrupt. And the people? Well, the people followed the tide. Several of the managers who once rolled their eyes during my presentations, who sent me 11 p.m. Slack messages like it was proof of commitment, were let go. Not in scandal, not in public disgrace, just quietly removed. Like stains scrubbed off a whiteboard no one wanted to talk about anymore. I found out through a former colleague who messaged me, "Your ghosts are all gone." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because they didn't matter anymore. I had stopped checking their stock price. I no longer scrolled their press releases. My LinkedIn feed no longer revolved around the echo of what once was. I had finally done something I didn't think was possible. I let it go. Aviatech had scrapped their plans to outsource the service team overseas. The loss of institutional knowledge had crippled the transition. The offshore teams weren't trained, the internal teams were too depleted, and their clients weren't interested in being someone else's guinea pigs. What they hadn't realized, and never truly respected, was that people like me were the glue, the consistency, the reason clients stayed, the reason departments ran smoothly. And once you rip out the roots, the tree doesn't just wobble, it falls. But that wasn't my tree anymore. I was building my own forest. At Brixton and Rowe, my department was thriving. We weren't just hitting goals, we were setting new ones. I developed a mentorship program that paired rising strategists with seasoned professionals. Every quarter, we held client experience days, where we brought in real feedback, real people, and listened. We didn't just optimize, we cared. People were reaching out to join us, not just because we were growing, but because we were different, humane, functional, safe. In one all-hands meeting, I looked around and realized something that sent a chill down my spine, but in the best way possible. Every face in that room wanted to be there. Not for a paycheck, not out of fear, but because they believed in what we were building. Anna had flourished. Liam had already been promoted. Tasha now led her own sub-team and spoke at conferences. I watched them rise, and I didn't feel competitive or threatened. I felt proud. Like I had helped plant seeds in a garden no one else had bothered to water. And outside of work, life had finally become mine. Ellie had grown taller, more confident. Her art was pinned all over the fridge, mixed with sticky notes she left me before school. "Be amazing today. You're the best at emails. You make broccoli taste okay?" We had weekend traditions now. Pancakes with strawberries, library runs, lazy movie nights with popcorn in bowls too big for the couch. I read her bedtime stories without my phone in hand. I laughed more. I moved slower. I no longer counted minutes like a prisoner. One Sunday, while walking through a farmer's market, Ellie tugged on my sleeve. "Do you like your job now?" "I love it," I said. She thought for a moment. "You used to come home and sit in your car for a long time." I blinked. "You noticed that?" She nodded solemnly. "I thought maybe your car was sad." My throat closed. I crouched down to her eye level. "My car wasn't sad," I said gently. "I was, but not anymore." She smiled and pulled me toward a table full of candles. "Then let's get your car a happy smell." We picked one called Fresh Beginnings, and in a way, that's exactly what I'd been living. A fresh beginning. Sometimes, late at night, I would lie in bed with a book in my lap and think about the version of me that stayed. The one who accepted the 70% pay cut. Who smiled politely and kept saying thank you, even when it wasn't deserved. Who trained her replacement and swallowed her pain. I mourned her. She didn't disappear overnight. I had to let her go piece by piece, word by word, moment by moment. But in her place, I met someone new. A woman who led with clarity, who didn't beg to be seen, who didn't apologize for shining, who didn't fear starting over. Because she wasn't starting over, she was building forward. And as I tucked Ellie into bed that night and turned off the light, I whispered one last promise. To myself and to every woman who had ever sat silently in a meeting room full of men who underestimated her. Never again. It was the kind of crisp spring morning that felt like it had something to say. A breeze that nudged your collar just enough to make you notice, sky streaked with gold. I was headed to a local leadership conference, one of those mid-range events where the coffee was average, the panels were predictable, and the real action happened in hallways between sessions. I hadn't planned to speak. I was there for a networking brunch and to support one of my rising stars, Tasha, who was presenting for the first time. She'd spent 2 weeks practicing and still had index cards in her coat pocket. "I'm going to forget everything and just mumble about data," she whispered on the escalator up to the mezzanine. I smiled. "Then mumble with confidence." She laughed, more relaxed, and disappeared toward the speaker room. I went to grab coffee, strong, slightly burnt, and turned around just in time to see someone I hadn't thought about in months. Caleb Morgan, the original founder of AviorTech. He stood near the tall windows, alone, hands tucked into the pockets of a slate blue blazer. He looked older, not in a way that made you feel sorry for him, just weathered, like a building that had survived more winters than planned. For a second, I considered turning around, but he saw me first. He gave a small nod. "Stacy." I approached slowly, not out of fear, just curiosity. "Caleb," I said. "I've been hoping we'd cross paths." He gave a rueful smile. "Didn't expect it to be at a keynote brunch next to a lukewarm buffet." We shared a quiet laugh. And then silence. It wasn't tense, just waited. "I've heard about what you're building," he said finally. "Everyone's talking about it." "I guess word gets around." "You pulled your old team together, brought in new blood, kept nearly all your clients, and made Brixton and Rowe the one to watch this year." I shrugged. "We're just getting started." He nodded. "It's impressive." There was more behind his eyes. Regret, recognition, maybe even a little guilt. "I wanted to say something," he said. "Not as an excuse, just something I should have said a long time ago." I waited. I was wrong. Simple, clean, honest. "I believed the acquisition would secure the future of the company," he went on. "I told myself it was smart business, and I convinced myself that people like you, Anna, Liam, you'd adapt, that you were so good they'd have to keep you." He shook his head, lips pressed tight. "But instead, they used you, cut you out, and I watched it happen." "You walked away," I said softly. "I did," he admitted. "I told myself I couldn't stop the wave, that it was better to get out early. But really, I didn't want to face what they were doing to the people who built the foundation I was selling." I let his words settle, because for so long, I had wanted that admission. Not for revenge, for closure. "I blamed you, I said quietly. "When everything started falling apart, I told myself you could have stopped it, that you chose money over people." He nodded. "You were right to feel that way." "I don't anymore," I said. He looked up, surprised. "Because if you hadn't walked away, maybe I wouldn't have." It was the truth. If he had stayed and shielded me, if he had fought for my role and softened the blow, I might have clung to that false sense of loyalty for another year, another decade. I might never have known what I was truly capable of. "I found something better," I said. "Not just a new job, a new way of existing, of leading." He smiled, not sadly, but gratefully. "I'm glad," he said. "You deserved that." I looked around the lobby, the polished floors, the glassy eyes of other executives doing their rounds, the rustle of name tags, and LinkedIn conversations. And then I said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That true victory, it's not in making more money. It's not in watching your old bosses fall or your old company flail. That stuff fades." He nodded. "It's in waking up and knowing you're free, that you said no when it mattered, that you stood up for yourself, that you built something." He looked down at his hands. "And that's something I never learned how to do." "You still can," I said, "but you have to start by caring more about people than you do about spreadsheets." He laughed. "You sound like me 10 years ago." "No," I said. "I sound like me now." We parted with a handshake. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just honest. That evening, Ellie met me on the front steps of our apartment, still in her school clothes, face lit up with joy. "Guess what?" she shouted. "We got to pick animals we'd want to be, and I said I want to be like you." I blinked. "Like me? What kind of animal is that?" She grinned. "A lion. Because they're strong and smart, but they don't need to roar all the time. Everyone just knows not to mess with them." I laughed, picked her up and held her tight. "I like that," I whispered. And as we walked inside, I knew exactly what she meant. Because I no longer needed to roar to prove anything. I had already won, by living a life I never had to escape from. And that, more than anything else, was the best revenge of all.